So a lot of hoo-haing and a lot of the usual suspects coming out of the woodwork saying that Starmer has U-turned on his Green Project pledge. The whole plan to start a new Green New Deal, a U-turn on his £28 billion pledge a year to spend on green projects. Now, has he actually said, no, we're not going to do that? No, he hasn't. He has not ruled that out. He has not said, no, we are not going to spend that. However, what I think might happen instead is rather than it be 28 billion a year, you would probably see a smaller number because, well, the UK isn't exactly in the best economic situation to be able to borrow 28 billion pounds a year. That would have a big effect on our inflation, on our economy. The cost of borrowing has dramatically gone up. That will also have big effects on our economy as well. The reality is that there are economic conditions that are putting Labour to change their plans. That is the reality of the whole thing. That is just the reality, and that is something we're going to have to accept. And as I've said before, in politics, sometimes you don't get everything you want. But I'll tell you what, Labour doing this and pledging to spend all this money on green projects every year, while it may not be 28 billion initially, what if it's this much a year? Then it ramps up because the economy gets improved. If Starmer is going to pledge to over a decade of national renewal, then investing in Britain, in our economy, is something he is going to have to do. But don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone else's word for it. Let's have a look today at BBC Verify. For those of you who don't know what BBC Verify is, before we get into it, it is the BBC's brand new fact-checking service that launched, I think it was about a month or two ago. I think it's very, very new. But this is a new section of the BBC which they have launched to go, we are going out, if there is claims, if people are suspected about any claims, this is what we are saying. This is what we can verify at this current time as to what is said, what has happened. And so we're going to have a look at that. We're going to have a look today at what BBC Verify specifically has said and what they have to say about this. But before we do go into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one of today's link called Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club as well. So let's go on into it then. So, as we said, this comes from the BBC. So, would Labour spend £28 billion a year on green projects? And like I say, this is BBC Verify. So, let's see what it says. So, first of all, claim. Labour is planning to spend an extra £28 billion a year on green investments and has gone through various changes since it was first announced in September of 2021. So what is it and how will it work? So the plan was first announced back in September of 2021, when the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said that Labour would put £28 billion every year of this decade towards a transition into a green economy. The so-called Green Prosperity Plan would be spent on projects such as offshore wind farms and developing batteries for electric vehicles. In June of 2023, Reeves said that this amount would not be spent on day one of a Labour government because of the poor economic picture and the soaring cost of borrowing. But as we said at the beginning, this money is planned to be borrowed. And if you want to prove that you are a reasonable economic government, probably got to, show that you've got to do this. Borrowing and then, unfortunately, getting into more debt, probably not going to be a very good look for Labour to start doing, admittedly. You've got to think about the optics of what this would be. So Labour leader Keir Starmer also confirmed in January 24 that the amount would be increased over time. Okay, that's good. If you're not going to start at 28 billion, start at something and then ramp up as it goes along, which would then reach £28 billion a year in the second half of the next parliament, which would be after 2027. He also said that Labour would spend less if the amount of borrowing needed would break its self-imposed fiscal rules. These include a pledge that government debt should be on course to fall as a share of the size of the economy in 5 years. Now, I think these fiscal rules, as much as Corbyn had to do something very similar by making sure that his pledges were properly funded, because the Conservatives, time and time again, made mincemeat uh, of him in the campaigning season during those particular general elections that lost him a lot of votes. But if these are self-imposed fiscal rules, and let's say Labour win, Starmer's got no reason, if the economic realities justify breaking those fiscal rules, if he has to try and help save the economy, to, spend more money. I am fine with that happening. And I think, to be honest, these honestly end up going to be becoming a straitjacket, I think, for him. That eventually, I think him and Reeves, and I think most of other Labour MPs in Parliament, will want to get rid of, because they know that they need to invest in the UK, and they need to start doing that because the Tories have shown over the past 13, 14 years of government at this point that not doing so has a lot worse economic outcomes. So anyway, it continues. Of course, and the party has said that every pound invested by the government in clean energy production would be matched by a £3 of private investment. Also, Ben Zarka, from the independent think tank from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, says that because the current government has announced around £8 billion of future climate-related investment and has pledged another £2 billion in investment in the hydrogen industries, Labour's plans imply an extra £18 billion rather than just £28 billion a year. So there are stuff on for this. So what the Conservatives said. So the government obviously regularly criticises this plan. In Parliament on the 15th of November, Rishi Sunak said that it would push up inflation. Laura Trott, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, argued in the Times that it would lead to tax rises, and Home Secretary James Cleverly told the BBC Breakfast on December 31st that it would saddle people with over £28 billion worth of debt. What, of course, would the impact of the economy be? So, it is hard at the moment to assess the full impact, because Labour has not yet presented a full plan or a timetable how it would pay for this green investments. Diane Cole, the professor of public policy at the University of Cambridge, says that borrowing to invest isn't pardon me, that borrowing to invest isn't a bad thing in itself. The key question is whether the investment will pay off in higher economic growth and therefore potential tax revenues. She adds that the extra debt wouldn't automatically raise inflation. It would depend on how the Bank of England responded, and the central bank is responsible for keeping inflation under control. Ben Zagro of the IEF also pointed out that successive governments have struggled to invest the amounts that they have always said they are going to, and agrees that how well the money is spent is going to be crucial to the impact of the plan. So that is the big key takeaway here. Starmer has not U-turned. That is something I want to make expressly clear. Despite what anyone else might be saying, or you hear them that, Starmer has not U-turned. Starmer is still pledging to spend a lot of money in green projects. Just maybe not that 28 billion right off the bat. And as was said there, if Labour's plans and it follows through with those plans, maybe in to begin with, it spends 18 and then eventually ramps up to 28 billion. And of course, the key thing also, as you said, taking away there, is that the investment is spent properly into projects that are going to grow the economy. If Labour can spend this money and prove that they can spend this money consistently, that there is a good return on this borrowing, that it is growing the economy, and thereby saying, okay, well, we borrowed this much this year. Now we're going to borrow more each year to spend more into these green projects because we've seen last year it grows the economy. Overall, there has been no U-turn. It's just still there. It's just the amount of money at this moment in time can't really be put a figure on. And as was also said, you have seen previous governments really struggle due to inflation, due to the bad economic situation at the moment, really struggle to get that money and to sort of match that level. But if we can start small, invest in good projects that do end up growing the economy, do go that way, then yeah, we can borrow more. We can put more money into it. And of course, you can ramp it up slowly over time. That's perfectly fine. There's no problem in that. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.